Yes! I like this part of the show.
It's one of the best.
I agree. No, I totally agree.
You want to tell everybody what we're drinking?
Sure. Tonight, we bent the rules just a little bit, but we are still holding true to our Michigan brand. Tonight, we're actually drinking a cocktail. Now, this cocktail is part salted caramel vodka from...
It's Smirnoff.
Oh, well, it's still pretty good.
Yeah.
I took maybe a little swig just clean out of the bottle to give it a taste, and I didn't hate it. I'm not a vodka drinker by any means, but it was all right. But we mixed that with apple cider, and I have no idea if that's already a drink or if that's called something, but it's fucking good. And we thought it was appropriate because not only is it fall time, and not only are they Michigan apples, but Kaylin would probably hate it because, you know, you can't eat red things or drink red fruit juice, I'm assuming, and this qualifies as that. But we thought it related.
Right. We went to the apple orchard just yesterday with the family, and we actually had a conversation about how we didn't think that Kaylin had ever tasted this stuff. I know we had mentioned this a little bit in a past episode, that it would make no sense for her to have apple juice or apple cider if they thought that the fruit was poisonous. Of course the juice is.
Right, and that is not a world that I want to live in. I love apple cider. And Jade's favorite juice, just a little bit of trivia, it's apple juice. So.
I like apple stuff. I think I've mentioned this a couple times.
That's absolutely true.
But yeah, so I think that we need to go pour ourselves another round, and we'll be right back.
Perfect.
And we're back. So Richard knew once he started this conversation there was no going back, because he has some pretty big knowledge that he hasn't let the other people know yet. He looks at Zed and he says, "We need your help." And Zed says, I know, you need me to help you find the wizard." Richard's like, "No, that's not necessary anymore, dude. I know you're the great wizard." And I think that this might be what was worrying him 2 chapters ago.
I think so.
When I was so confused, yeah, I think that's maybe why it fell so flat for us, because he randomly was just worried about something that he wasn't letting on to even the reader. Now, our fan, Sean, our friend Sean, who is one of our favorites and comments in the Sword of Truth series book club now, mentioned that he thought that it was because Richard was part of a 3-person conversation where his oldest friend met his new friend and had, like, the weirdest reaction ever. "Has she touched you? What are you doing with this creature? She's not a girl or a woman. She's a creature." And Richard is a seeker, and while he doesn't know exactly what's up, he knew something was up when Zed had such a hostile reaction to Kaylin. Now, that sounded totally plausible then, and I guess it kind of even goes along with what we're saying now. It's just we didn't have full knowledge.
Right, we didn't see the whole picture yet.
Right, Richard was seeing more than we could at the time, obviously.
If you guys have read the series through it all, you'll know this is kind of a through line for Richard. He's normally the smartest guy in the room. Or at the very least, he tries to be.
Right. And so when he makes this revelation, Kaylin starts to stand up. And Richard stops her, even though it's kind of sneaking under the table, so that Zed doesn't know that she's starting to freak out a little bit, I think. And then Zed's like, "Why? What?"
Yeah.
"Why would you think that?"
No.
And Richard's like, "Well, when Kaylin told me about the 3 lands and the Great Wizard said that he was going to leave the council to the consequences of their own actions after they made the death of his wife and daughter mean nothing."
Zed has a past wife and daughter.
Right. And it sounded like something that Zed would say and do. And be like, "Dude, you fucked up. Bye. You're going to deal with it now."
Right.
But he wasn't sure yet at that point. And then he told Zed about the quad. And this, again, all during the last chapter that we were just talking about. So during that chapter, he mentioned to Zed about the quad. And he noticed that it changed his attitude toward Kaylin. And it changed the look in his eyes, even.
Right. At first, he did not like Kaylin at all until he told Zed that she was being hunted by a quad. And that softened him up.
Right. And he told her she was safe. Not only was he completely changed towards her, but he said she was safe. And that's a weird thing to say for a regular old man.
Right. A regular old man couldn't do anything to keep Kaylin safe, but a wizard could. And of that, Richard was sure.
And so now this all kind of falls into place, because it was right after all this was said that Richard, I want to say made the comment, but he didn't. He thought the thought that he was worried, and that's when he touched the tooth, and he was worried about the thing that he now knew, and it was that Zed was the wizard.
Oh, man. Yeah, I didn't even put it together that far back, and I've read this book, like, I think I said 15 times. That might be an exaggeration, but for sure at least 10. And I never picked up on it that early in the book. That's what Richard knew. That kind of blows my mind. But, yeah, no, now that it's laid out like this, I can't not see it. That's got to be the thing.
And I mean, that's the whole point of why we're doing this podcast, is so that we can pick these little pieces apart and be like, oh, did you realize
that Richard's a smart motherfucker?
And so then he goes on to he tells Zed, I always knew you were a special person. I knew you would do anything to help me if I were in danger, just like I would do for you. And now my life is in your hands. And he hated doing that to Zed, but he knew it was going to work if he did.
Oh, you mean he hated trapping him?
Yeah.
I kind of feel like if Richard had just now realized that he was the great wizard, that he might be more excited to hear his friend of many years finally reveal it to be true, and less likely to feel like he was trapping him. But because of the thing we just learned, now Richard's been sitting on this for a while. He's probably also been thinking about, how do I get this guy to admit he's the great wizard if he has been in hiding all of these years? He's not going to be real quick to just out himself. So, yeah, it makes total sense. He kind of feels like he's trapping his friend. He's making him expose himself in a different way than he did when we first met him, that is.
Well, and he's also forcing him to do whatever this thing is that Kaylin wants him to do. He's making him help them, because I think that's why it all links up now. The way he was telling Kaylin, like, don't fucking ask him before I wake up, because he knew Kaylin could hurt Zed if he refused, and if Zed wasn't ready to admit he was the great wizard and help everybody, then he would be hurt.
That makes perfect sense. Holy shit, Jade. What do you guys think? Does this all tie in together? I'm looking at this in a different light than I've ever looked at it before, and I'm kind of blown away, to be honest. Props to Goodkind on this one. He knows how to just make everything connect in a way that the normal person wouldn't catch right away. So, Zed at that point looks at Richard and tells him that he has never been so proud of him, that he got it all right. And that's kind of a through line in the series. Whenever Zed says that to Richard, Zed is revealing, you got it figured out, kid. Good job. And I feel like happy for Richard. It's like, yeah, dude, you went out on a big limb. You figured out some difficult shit that nobody has been able to figure out since the boundaries went up. And over the course of a conversation between your two friends, you figured out that Zed was the great missing wizard.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. And I think the reason you feel so good about it, too, is it's like your dad or your grandpa looking at, like, you can almost feel that sense of pride that Zed has to be looking at him with, like, yeah, man, you did it.
The acknowledgement, the acceptance, absolutely.
The way he would grab his shoulder and, like, shake it a little bit. I mean, he actually comes around the table and gives him a hug, so it's a little bit more of, like, an actual hug. But, yeah.
Hugging it out.
Yeah.
And then he says something completely contrast to that. He says he's never been this sad for him either. And then said, I'll be right back. I have something for you.
A little weird.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And it doesn't say this in the book, but I feel like Richard would naturally turn to Kaylin at this point and be like, what the fuck is he talking about? But none of that happens. Zed apparently is pretty spry, and he's back in just a minute. And he comes out with a sword.
And Kaylin apparently is super against this sword. She starts desperately, it says, pushing at him and saying, no, choose somebody else. And Zed's like, no, I fucking told you I can't do that. If I choose someone other than the true one, everyone will die.
All right, pause button. Kaylin and Zed had a conversation in the last chapter where Kaylin is explaining to Zed that she needs to find the wizard so that the wizard can appoint the true seeker and that the seeker can go kick Dark and Rawl's fucking ass, right?
Right.
Zed then clarifies to Kaylin that no. The Great Wizard doesn't actually appoint the seeker appoints himself. The wizard just kind of makes it official, right?
Right.
Kaylin has had a conversation already with Richard where Richard says, I'm a seeker of truth. And Kaylin freaks the fuck out because he said, I'm the seeker of truth.
Yeah.
So wouldn't Kaylin, this might be a stretch, but wouldn't Kaylin already have a decent idea that Richard was going to be named the seeker because of what Zed said in the previous chapter?
Well, not only that, but also the way that Shar...
Boom.
Not only that, but also the way that Shar reacted to Richard, I feel like would give you kind of a clue.
I didn't even think about Shar. You're absolutely right.
Shar was all like, Dark and Roll is chasing you, and he wants you to die, and blah, blah, blah.
For no reason at all whatsoever.
Right. And on top of that, I had even said during the last chapter that I thought that Kaylin kind of had a feeling that Zed was the wizard, and all of this would, I mean, yeah, it would all kind of fall in line, you would think. But as soon as Richard made the comment about Zed being a wizard, she was all like, the fuck?
Right.
So, I don't know if Kaylin was just being a little thick, or if she was like, denial is the river I want to float on right now.
Probably. I mean, she feels a certain way about Richard. He's the only person that looks at her or holds her hand without shaking in fear, apparently. So she feels kind of strongly towards him. Not necessarily a romantic way yet, but she doesn't want him to be in danger, and she knows that the Seeker is going to probably die.
Right. I mean, it might be in a romantic way. She did meet him all hot and sweaty, covered in them pheromones.
Tripping balls,
yeah. He had to have some kind of little wild man look in his eye. But Zed brings out the sword, and he slams it down on the table and says, this belongs to you. In a very fierce fucking... I feel like Richard at this point would be like, whoa, bud.
The hell did I do?
Sorry I called you out, but you don't need to get so mad at me about it.
But then Richard takes in his new sword. Steel crossguards, swept out and down, gold flourishes embellished it, twisted silver wire covered the grip, and interwoven gold wire formed the word truth directly on the hilt. And it makes the comment that it was the finest weapon he had ever seen, something that royalty would probably have.
Yeah, it looked like a king's sword.
Right. And I like this part. Zed's like, well, take it out, man. Come on, see your fucking sword. But it wasn't quite as comical as that. He was like, draw the sword. Yeah,
it was way more intense. Draw it.
You can tell this is a serious moment.
Yeah, because Richard does, and it makes a metallic ringing sound that he's never heard a sword make before. It's a weird noise that, like, echoes.
Like this.
And he could feel the word truth pushing into the flesh on his hand. Now, real quick, is this the same hand that was bit by the snake vine?
I don't know.
I don't know that it matters that much, but I was just thinking, like, that's a lot for that hand to go through.
I guess I always kind of pictured it that his left hand was bitten by the snake vine and his right hand was holding the sword. But I don't think it really says which hand is bitten by the snake vine. I think he was just ripping it off.
I feel like this could make some pretty awesome fan art if it was, like, Richard has a sword in one hand and the snake vine in the other. Whatever. Anyways, I digress. When he holds the sword in his hand, it makes him feel complete. And then he also feels twin to the rage he feels inside, which we haven't talked a whole lot about. We know that he pushes his anger, like, down inside him. He doesn't, like, let it out a whole lot. This is the first time that it's kind of been pulled out.
Yeah, I feel like Richard is definitely a type B personality where he doesn't let his anger get the best of him for as long as possible. Now, that probably tends to mean eventually he's going to snap.
Yeah. But apparently he found a way to let it out because when he holds the sword, it's like flowing and it's seductive to him. He almost panics because he can't control himself when the sword is out. Zed screams to the sky, Fair warning to those living and those dead. The Seeker has been named.